I guess I loved my father as all children love their father, I think, but I'm not sure. I do not recall my father hugging me or my hugging my father. There was not a physical relationship there.
No, that wasn't part of it.
That was not part of it.
The only time I saw that kind of physical relationship on the part of our father was when Edna and I went back to Muskegon and saw him there for the last time, and we had Allison with us. And he actually got to see Allison and to hold her, and there was a real expression of.
Oh, great, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Never
He
knew
held
that.
her.
He held her. Yeah, I have photographs of him.
Which is something I've never done, and I'm 79 years old. So
Wow.
I give that to my father.
This is a question I've asked you in the past. When you were young men, you all felt very, very confident, or was there a feeling like, obviously later in life, your father had a tendency to want to make you feel weak?
No, when I was young, I think his feeling of me was, which was right, was that I was a dreamer, and he had to kind of wake me up and get me moving and so forth. But my dreams were all good dreams. I was basically happy with life.
Oh, but did other people?
What considered me weak was when I failed to take his side in the dispute over Walter. That's when he thought I was weak. Now I could be wrong, but I think that
I think you're right there. Yeah.
Now and like you remember your father perceiving Rolf as weak also?
Yes. Oh yes.
How did
but
you?
only at that time.
From your
How,
question.
how did you avoid
Yeah, how'd you escape
your
that?
father feeling that you were weak or wrong in the whole thing with Walter?
Because first of all, I was much younger. I was 6 years younger than Walt.
See, that's what I
He's
said.
that way.
He's the youngest.
Second, I would never pull the. I knew that Walt knew that I liked him and that I agreed with him, and so I would tell the lie. I would, shouldn't say I'd tell the lie, but I would go along. I would appease. I would try to make it calm. I would not disagree with my father.
Acquiesce.
No confrontation.
No confrontation. I would avoid confrontation. I became very good at that, except for one time. My father also felt he would think for a dozen people. He would tell Pete and Marjorie, he'd tell Pete what books he should be reading. He'd tell us, I don't know how many books he told you should read before you went to Germany. But boy, he had a bunch of them.
I was too busy making enough money.
To go,
Yeah.
to be reading a book.
I had to get $160 together
Yeah.
to be able to go to Europe.
But he felt that I should read a good newspaper, and the good newspaper was the Chicago Tribune. And so he gave me a subscription to the Chicago Tribune, extra wrapping on it, the whole 9 yards. And he came to visit me when I was going to Michigan State. Came up to my room, I wasn't there, my roommate let him in. And here, stacked up like cordwood alongside my desk, were the Chicago Tribs.
No.
Oh.
I had never even opened them. That created a confrontation.
I was aware that your father, our father, could never really criticize you, but that didn't cause me to dislike you. That wasn't your fault. No, that was just the idiosyncrasy. That was the subconscious of our father. I understood that.
And he couldn't cut off all contact. Thank you. He couldn't cut off all contact from the family. And so I was the final link to the family.
This week. The next was Woody, and he cut off so badly there. He was just sure that he was right, and that anyone in their right mind could see how terrible Walter was. And so we lived in East Lansing. You were already working for Bendix. You were down in Port Moresby in the Pacific in the war. We were living on Albert Street in East Lansing, Michigan. You were in high school. I was in college. And we had rented a house there, 319 Albert Street. And then when I went off to the Navy and you went to the Air Corps, when you gave up the house and became a house mother for one of the sorority houses.
Oh, I've forgotten that.
Yeah.
And Papa went to the Dean of Women at Michigan State College, now University, and said, you have a woman as a house mother at one of the sororities who cannot be trusted because she is mentally imbalanced, she can't understand what is going on in the family, and so on and so forth. And the Dean of Women came to the conclusion there was nothing wrong with Mutti except that she was married to a man who would go out of his way to go see the Dean of Women, and they couldn't take a chance on having Mutti there as long as she was married to Frank Illsley. And so Mutti lost her job as Dean of Women. Did you know that?
No.
Now,
Never.
did you have it as house mother?
House mother.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Lost her job as house mother.
Yeah.
What was Mutti's attitude? It's sad. I'll find another job.
She
never-
found another job where she.
as a nurse for the Eleanor.
A nana for, well, at one point she was a nana for some family in Chicago.
2 doctors.
And she walked and walked and walked, taking care of these kids until she ruined her feet.
Yeah. But she never held it against our father because
There was pity for his
she had no
condition.
bitterness. She had no bitterness.
No, she
How-
said that he was, well, she described his mental condition. And, you know, that he was a victim of a mental disorder.
You've all had to keep your cool in potentially very dangerous situations. You've been held at knife point.
So I guess it was good preparation. We recommend it for everybody.
I don't recommend.
Okay, so how much jail time have you gentlemen actually served? I mean, what about some of these arrests?
You know, I think that one of the things that I learned, and probably my 2 brothers learned as well, early on, was the concept that there was something to psychiatry. That in the human being there is the ego and the id, and that you do things because of your subconscious. We knew that our father was basically a good man who absolutely wanted to do right. He had a great feeling of responsibility and so forth, and
Ethic.
yet an ethic and so forth, and yet his life was badly screwed up, and it allowed me fairly early on in my screwed up life to go get some help and understand what was screwing me up.
In helping us work through our conflict problems that we ran into, she used the benefit of her understanding of how to deal with these problems.
She taught by
and
example?
By example, yeah, and
By
by
example,
coaching
by
us.
advice.
Coaching,
Coaching.
giving advice
Yeah.
of how to. So we benefited from, without ever knowing it, just from her very extensive knowledge.
So the school teacher you're referring to is this early school teacher you had?
Yeah.
Mrs. Neese.
Yeah.
But you had, it's interesting, several times, I mean, you had a pretty hard time with her then? You,
It's to the where the other kids would come in and say, hey, and what's old lady niece got against you?
and what sort of things was that?
My mother. Because my mother was in the Parent Teachers Association
Old lady
and
niece.
was developed the program and became a
leading
statewide
light.
figure, and it was and she was supposed to be the principal of the school, and she was falling in the shadow. And the other teacher, the second teacher of the school, was very close to my mother, and
did Lindsay
was bringing
explain to
soup
you
soup
what was
bones to
going
us.
on with that
And so there
teacher?
was the competition between these 2
Yeah.
teachers in the school.
I got it. Did Mutti explain to you what was going on with that teacher?
Why she was behaving
Why
that
she
way?
was like
I
that?
don't recall,
Mm.
but I know that she never supported any attitude of rebelliousness or vindictiveness or anything else. Her approach was always one
Passive.
of understanding.
People, I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but Mutti's last 25 35 years, 30 years, she was active in the Quakers. She became a really good Quaker.
And dedicated. Yeah.
Dedicated. You know that after the Elder camp and where she could no longer be at Michigan State, she then was the house mother at the Quaker House, 1830 Sutter Street in San Francisco. So she was a Quaker. And we
And
knew
at the Quaker Center in Mexico City.
I didn't know that.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, and then when she went to Europe, first directed the Quaker Center in Berlin, and then went down and directed the Quaker Student Center at the University of Unity for a number of years.
Now, we knew a lot about her thinking, how she felt about things, and she was truly a pacifist, although she did not object to my going in the Navy or to your going
No.
in the Air Corps, but she dealt a lot with true conscientious objectors and so
Well,
forth, and she
she-
was
she-
a pacifist.
She was a
Yeah.
pragmatic pacifist.
Yeah, but she was, that must have been a very difficult internal problem for her. In the,
But she had two sons in the military, and the third one was even more active out in the battle zones.
She had two sons in the military and one son who was getting stuff done.
Yeah, But Woody always had a very gentle attitude. And I like this little story about when Norman was very young and had this great imagination, and he would tell very nice, interesting stories, some of which he made up. But they were always good when he made them up. And Woody would ask Norman, "Now, Norman, that's a very interesting story. Is it also a true story?"
Yeah. And it depended. It would usually start as a true story, but then at the end you couldn't just stop. You had to go on and see what happened. And so my imagination would tell what happened.
And so what was your response when Woody would say, "That's a very interesting story, is it also true?"
Well,
do
no,
you
it's not
remember that or
true.
not?
Oh, yeah, I can
Oh.
remember sitting at the kitchen table at Tontoletti's and spinning a yarn.
No.
And then acknowledging it was not
It
true.
was a yarn.
Now, some mothers would say, "I'm going to slap your face because you've told another lie." That was not Woody's approach. That was not
Yeah.
Woody's approach to raising children.
Another problem she had with her children was that there was a refugee Polish fisherman who came and lived.
Sig Barber.
Sig Barber, whose name definitely was not Barber. He came into the States somehow, illegal immigrant, and took on the name Barber. But he did very
And
well
he
as a
had a
fisherman.
little smokehouse in back of the Porters, which was the
That's
next
right.
house south of us,
Yeah,
Porter's house.
a considerable distance south of us.
Oh, yeah, quite a distance.
And they had a windmill too.
Yeah.
And so after the fish had been smoking and it was ready, they opened the smokehouse and he'd have this delicious stuff and he would give it to us. And finally, the ruling came down that no more smoked fish. out of
Sig
the
Barber is
smoker.
supposed to be selling those fish. If you eat his fish, you're eating his profits. You should not be taking Sig Barber's fish.
Yeah, and so came the day when Sig Barber opened his fish house, and he gave some fish to, and he.
I stayed
managed
on the
to-
far side of the fish house where Woody couldn't see me.
Somehow she still knew that he'd been eating smoked fish
I
when he
came
got home.
home and she
She
knew
wondered
I-
how.
That's right.